Everyone. So there was another critical incident involving the police in Washington, D.C. yesterday. A young man named Deon Kay was shot and killed, and it's captured the public's attention. There was video just released by the police department this morning, body camera footage from the perspective of the officer who fired the shot. So what I'm going to do today is play that video and then commentate as the video plays and just try to provide my perspective and add some context to the video. So I'm a former police officer. I was an officer for about 9 years. Was involved in lethal force encounters and other use of force encounters. And now I study police use of force as a PhD student. So I've watched hundreds of these videos and read a few thousand accounts. So hopefully you guys find it useful. And the goal is not to be critical of police. It's not to be critical of the citizens involved, but just to try to add some context because these events are so controversial and they can lead to social upheaval. So I think it's important that we try to place them in context and have constructive conversations about them. So I'm going to go ahead and head over to the video and I'll play it. It picks up with the officers arriving on scene at a call, and the information that the police department is releasing is that there was a call for service generated where it was reported that someone was in the community with a gun. Officers arrived, and according to the officers, they see some young men flee on foot, and they engage in a short foot pursuit before the shooting. So we're gonna pick up with them arriving on scene, and all of these cases are judged based on what a reasonable officer would have done given the totality of the circumstances and without the benefit of 20/20 hindsight. So as they're arriving, it's important to think about what the mindset of the officer was and what they were anticipating. And if the call is that there's a person with a gun, you're going to be on high alert. You're going to be anticipating that this may be a dangerous encounter. So officers are going to be a little bit on edge, and there's going to be a little bit of adrenaline involved. And especially if as you arrive, you see people fleeing on foot. So we're gonna start. The sound doesn't kick in right away. It starts when the officer exits the vehicle. The officers drive up. And we're going to see here he reaches for the door, quickly exits the vehicle. And this is what they see. And it's difficult to make out. If you watch it a few times, you'll see an individual take off. As we go through it, you'll see someone running down over this hill. As the officer approaches, you'll see someone disappear into the distance. And then you'll see someone running out around this vehicle. And that's the person that the officer confronts, Mr. K. So right here, the officer ran, there's his patrol vehicle. He ran down this way and cut off Mr. K, who's running in this direction here. And the officer is in a position where he has a person running in their direction. I'll show a still in a minute, but it certainly does appear as though that this gentleman has a handgun in his right hand. And it's difficult to see. It's very quick. We hear one shot. Officer runs up, comes around the other side of the vehicle, gives multiple commands, don't move, sees a handgun in the right hand of the subject who's running towards them. When you run, your arms are moving, and it's very difficult in that split second to make a determination on whether or not the person is just running with the gun or if they're leveling the gun at them. And it doesn't take long for someone to level a gun at you as they're running towards you with a gun in their hand and to discharge a round. If someone is confronted by the police and they have a handgun in their hand, they typically will drop the gun to avoid a confrontation, because it's understood if you run towards an officer with a gun in your hand, that could lead to a deadly encounter, because it would be reasonable for an officer to feel threatened in that situation and to feel as though they were, in my opinion, and this is informed by my experience and my understanding of policing, that I think that most reasonable officers would feel under threat in that situation. I'll go back and play it one more time because it happens very quickly, so I'm playing this multiple times. And the key here is, as you're watching this, is try to imagine, is we can't look at this with hindsight. We need to say, if I was this person, this officer, in this specific situation with the information that they had available to them, what decision would be reasonable? It doesn't necessarily need to be the correct decision, the most tactically sound decision. It just needs to be a decision that was reasonable for a person to make, and made in good faith. I think this is a situation where that's the case. We'll play it one more time and just pay attention to how little time is available to make this decision. So you see people running, you run around a corner, see a gun, I shoot. It's almost instantaneous. Now, this is something I notice is spontaneous utterances. So things that are said under stress in court typically hold more sway. And as a human being, when you hear someone say something in the heat of the moment, a lot of times you recognize it as revealing. So these officers are under stress, and immediately you hear them pointing out that there's a gun and pointing in the direction, and this officer immediately begins looking for it.
Hey, shots fired, shots fired.
The officer puts it out over the radio to let supervisors and other officers know.
Where is it?
This is going to elicit a major response by anyone who hears this. People are going to respond to this location.
I don't know. I'm looking for the gun. He's up there. I did.
So the other officers,
where's
the priorities right now are that you have an individual who's been shot. That threat needs to be neutralized, or that person needs to be handcuffed, make sure they don't have the weapon with them still. They're no longer a threat. If they had a gun in their hand and they're running towards an officer, I feel as though you can articulate that's a legitimate threat to the officer. And then once that threat has been neutralized and that person no longer represents a danger to the community or to the officers, then their obligation is to switch into a life-saving mode. So the officers that are up here with this person, they need to make sure that they render aid as quickly as possible, and that they, ensure that this individual receives medical care. And that could mean having the fire department or medical personnel roll in. It could mean scooping him up and putting him in a vehicle and taking him to a nearby hospital. But that's number one priority. Other priorities is that you have other individuals who were seen fleeing from this incident who may be involved in this incident, maybe witnesses, maybe engaging in criminal behavior. This is an ongoing investigation, so you need to set up a perimeter around this area and make sure that those individuals don't just run away and get away. And then another priority is the preservation of evidence. So this is all a crime scene now. It's going to be investigated by the Internal Affairs Bureau. It's going to be investigated by homicide detectives to make sure that this is, when an officer shoots and kills somebody, it's a homicide, and they need to ensure that there was no criminal behavior. So you have policy level and the criminal level ensuring that this was not unjustified. And you also need to preserve this evidence, so this officer knows looking for the gun.
Help me canvas.
Help me canvas. That means like help me look for the gun, or I'm gonna canvas. Did he say help me canvas?
Help me canvas.
Something canvas. Me canvas. And you can imagine, given what's happening in the world right now, that it would be, as an officer, you're gonna want to find this gun.
Where?
Because
where? Down this way?
You shot someone because they had a gun, and now they've thrown the gun.
He threw it. Yeah.
We have another officer coming down to give him a hand.
You good? Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Is there anybody else standing?
And this is why I was so disappointed when in Kenosha they didn't have body camera footage, because there are people out in the street protesting, upset, and people expect clarification. So the fact that the Washington, D.C. Police Department was able to release the footage of this the very next day, while in the past that may have been questionable because you wouldn't want to compromise an investigation while an investigation was ongoing. There was some legislation passed that required them to release it within 72 hours recently, from what I understand, and getting this out to the people within a day, I think is pretty impressive.
One, this way.
And I feel as though it's a necessity in this day and age, given the stakes. And we see these conflicting interests that are the concerns right now. The preservation of evidence. These guys trying to find it. They're going to be communicating, trying to set up this perimeter. This is a hectic situation. You can imagine that this officer's under a lot of stress. Okay.
He's got a do-rag on his head.
So now he says he's got it. He's located the weapon, and he's giving out a description of the person who ran away.
Black male, do-rag on his head, 5'4", 100 pounds, wearing a black shirt. I got it right here.
Do we think he has a gun?
I don't know. This is the one that he was holding.
And so officers are trying to
You good?
I'm good.
collect what information they have available and let everyone know
I think.
what's happening.
Dispatch, we have some records to go south far. We have an individual still outstanding. He's going to be a black
You
male.
hear this other officer relay the information that he's been provided to other officers so they can establish this perimeter and keep an eye out for this person that's run away.
Hey, firm, we're going to have a weapon recovery, but it's a possibility that he might be armed as well. You good?
I'm good, bro. Yeah. We got to secure this too.
Can we have a union rep response to the scene?
You hear the officer this other officer just asked for a union rep to respond to the scene, and you're going to hear in a minute this second officer is expressing concern for this other officer wants to make sure that a union representative comes and arrives to protect this officer who fired the round's interests. And that may sound a little crude, but this is just colleagues who are trying to protect each other's interests and ensure that they're given a fair opportunity to give their side of the story. You're not going to want to speak to investigators without an attorney present. I know I was involved in my fatal shooting. I had a union rep arrive, and I also had an attorney who was provided by my union. And I spoke with that attorney before I spoke with the homicide investigators. Just like if you were accused of a homicide as a civilian, I would recommend that you don't speak to police unless you have an attorney with you to make sure that your interests are protected.
I'm good. We just
And you hear
gotta
that
make sure this is.
I got you.
admonishment from this officer saying you don't speak to anybody without a union rep here.
Look, until union rep gets you, you don't say anything
I'm good.
to anyone.
I'm done, man. I'm good. We gotta make sure this is.
I got you. You may say, take a seat. I got it. Take a seat. Sit right there.
I'm good.
And this officer's trying to tell him to take a seat. He's worried about him being stressed and worried about the other officer's welfare.
There's going to be 2 weapon recoveries.
He's got one too?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Hey, firm. Is he a juvenile?
I don't know. I don't know if he is. I don't know if I think he was like a year ago, I think.
So that, to me, makes it sound like they may have known who they were dealing with. They're saying he was a juvenile a year ago. And I don't know if there was an existing knowledge on the part of the officers about who they were dealing with.
He cut the corner.
I mean, at this point, we got to deal with what we got right now.
I know.
Hey! Hold on.
I'm good.
I'll skip through a minute because the officer's here alone. Okay. Now the officer's going to relay the basic information he has. This would have been better if this had gone out
I'm
a
gonna
little
put the look
earlier.
at it. I hit my
but
radio,
it's-
my button.
It's difficult to do things perfectly in this kind of a situation. So he's going to provide a description of the person that got away.
What do you need?
Hey, direct to Falcon. The lookout for the one outstanding. It's going to be a black male. It's approximately 5'3" to 5'5". He's thin-built. He had a wrap over his head, and he was last seen running from 200 Orange over to what's that? 2nd Street?
2900 block of 2nd Street towards Malcolm X.
No, this is from the one involved. Is he in bad shape?
Huh?
Is he in bad shape?
Yes, if he's in bad shape.
Don't worry about it right now. Just
So the officer, from the body cam perspective, asks, is he in bad shape? And I think he's referring to the person that he shot. And the other officer says, you know, don't worry about it right now, which to me is like that this officer kind of knows things are not looking good for the person who shot, and he doesn't necessarily want to say
go sit
that.
down.
Tell him to go sit down.
I got it. Don't worry about it. Have a seat right there. I know you're worried about everything that's going on. Don't worry. People are taking care of everything else.
All right.
I know you're worried about everything that's going on. Don't worry. People are taking care of everything else.
All right.
It's difficult to see if we can see the weapon.
I know you're worried.
And the problem is the video is
Don't worry. People are taking care of everything
pixelated.
else.
All right.
The body camera footage doesn't provide us a great, I can't see the weapon from this officer's perspective.
Hey. Yeah.
Let's go. I gotta get in the car.
Now they're going to take this officer,
Just tell me where to go. You don't have to hold on. I'm good.
and you hear the officer say, "I'm good, Sarge. You don't have to hold on to me. Just tell me where to go." Which to me sort of sounds like the officer's got his hand on him, trying to like guide him, and not in a like, you know, you're under arrest kind of a way, but in like, hey, it's okay, let's get you to a vehicle kind of way. And the officer's wanting to walk on his own.
I'm good. All right.
Come on, this way.
Okay. I'm good, sir.
Get a car, bring it on the side.
Guns over there.
And you hear the officer, I'm assuming, swearing.
Camera's off. Turn the camera off.
Right, and then they turn the camera off. The image, there have been a bunch of people who have taken still shots of the young man running towards the officer, and it certainly appears that he has a firearm in his right hand. And again, this is going to be a lengthy investigation. Every person who was there is going to be separated and questioned by investigators, both the officers and the civilians. There are going to be reports written about everything. All this evidence is going to be collected. The gun's going to be photographed. The casings from the round that the officer discharged. The officers will canvass the area, try to locate any witnesses who may have seen it. They'll look for security cameras. And then once they have all of this information, it will be compiled into one sort of giant report with a handful of investigators who are charged with overseeing that investigation. And then they make a determination on whether or not the officer was acting, one investigation, parallel investigations. One investigation will look to see if they were acting within the policies that have been established by the police department. And then the other investigation will look to see if there's any type of criminal liability. And then on top of that, there may be some oversight in terms of civil litigation against the police department if in civil court they can prove some malfeasance on the part of the department or the officer. But again, this is very early on, very limited information. This video just gives us a tiny little piece of the puzzle, but the piece of the puzzle that I see leads me to think that my initial impressions are that I don't see anything in the video that leads me to think this is unreasonable. And I know that may be unpopular for some people to hear, but I think it's important that we try to view these things objectively. And if we have a case that's questionable or that's egregious, then it needs to be dealt with. But given the number of firearms that are out on the street and the level of violence in a lot of American cities, when police officers encounter someone who's running towards them with a gun and their arms are swinging, I don't think that we can say that it's unreasonable that the officer would discharge rounds, that they would fear that they were going to suffer serious physical injury or death, and that they would discharge their firearm in an effort to mitigate that risk. And that's the standard. So again, it's what would not a reasonable person, but a reasonable officer, based on the totality of the circumstances in that moment, when the moment to use force was made, and without the benefit of hindsight, of that 20/20 hindsight of me sitting at my computer desk and passing judgment. And when I apply that test to just this video, which is just a tiny snippet, I certainly don't see anything that stands out to me. So I hope this was useful. If you find it useful, please share this and follow the channel, whatever venue you're watching this. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.